On my 34th birthday, my parents announced they were redirecting my entire inheritance to my sister because she had children and I didn't. They expected my submission. Instead, I asked one specific question about Grandma, and by morning, a lawyer had destroyed their entire scheme. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I had been fighting a migraine for 3 days. It was that throbbing, relentless kind of pain that sits right behind the eyes, making the world look slightly too bright and too sharp. It was also my 34th birthday. Under normal circumstances, I would have canceled dinner. I would have drawn the blackout curtains in my apartment, ordered a plain broth, and slept until the sun went down. But you don't cancel on Thomas and Martha. You certainly don't cancel when they've insisted on booking a table at Le Jardin, the most pretentious French bistro in the city, specifically to celebrate your milestone. I arrived 10 minutes early, popping 2 painkillers in the car before walking in. The restaurant was loud, a cacophony of clinking silverware and performative laughter that grated against my nerves. When my parents arrived, they weren't alone. Chloe was with them. My sister, the golden child, the mother of the grandbabies, as Martha liked to call them with a reverent whisper. Chloe looked flustered, her hair in a messy bun, wearing a frantic expression that usually signaled she needed money, a babysitter, or both. "Happy birthday, darling," Martha said, pecking my cheek. Her perfume was overpowering, a floral scent that instantly made my nausea spike. "You look tired. Are you not sleeping again? You really should try that herbal tea I sent you links for." "I'm fine, Mom," I lied, sliding into the booth. "Just a long week at work. End of quarter reporting." "Work, work, work," Thomas grumbled as he sat down, adjusting his tie. He didn't look at me. He was staring at the menu with a furrowed brow, but his eyes weren't tracking the text. He looked nervous. Thomas was a man who prided himself on control, on being the patriarch who made the hard decisions, but tonight he had a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. "You focus too much on that job, Jessica. It's not healthy." "It pays the mortgage," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "For an empty house," Chloe chimed in. She picked up the wine list, scanning it aggressively. "I don't know why you need 4 bedrooms, Jess. It's just wasteful. The twins are sharing a room now because the extension is stalled and you have guest rooms collecting dust." I took a sip of water, the ice clinking against the glass. "We're not doing this tonight, Chloe. It's my birthday." "Exactly," Thomas said. He closed his menu with a sharp snap. He placed his hands flat on the table. "That's actually what we need to discuss. We have your gift. Well, it's not a gift exactly. It's a family decision." The waiter appeared, smiling professionally, ready to take drink orders. Thomas waved him away with a rude flick of his hand. "Give us 5 minutes." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I looked from Martha, who was studiously arranging her napkin, to Chloe, who was smirking slightly, to Thomas, who looked like he was preparing for battle. "Your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking," Thomas began, his voice dropping to that serious, lecture hall tone he used when I was a teenager. "About the estate, about Grandma's money." My stomach tightened. Grandma had passed away 6 months ago. The wound was still fresh for me, though the rest of them seemed to have moved on the moment the funeral service ended. Her will was supposed to be executed next week. "What about it?" I asked. "Well," Thomas cleared his throat, "it's a substantial amount, more than we anticipated, and we have to look at the needs of the whole family. Equity isn't always equality, Jessica." I knew exactly where this was going. I could feel it in my bones, a cold dread spreading through my chest. "Chloe is struggling," Martha interrupted, reaching out to touch my hand. Her palm was clammy. "With 3 little ones and the house repairs and her husband's hours being cut, she's drowning, Jessica, you know that." "And you," Thomas pointed a finger at me, "you are fine, you have a senior position, you have no dependents. You have a surplus of income every month. You don't need a windfall." So, I said, my voice trembling slightly, what are you saying? We're exercising our discretion as executors, Thomas said, his voice hardening. We are reallocating the inheritance. Your share, the portion Grandma intended for you, will be transferred to Chloe. It will pay off her debts and finish her house. It's the only moral thing to do. We knew you'd understand. They stared at me, expectant, entitled, waiting for me to nod, to smile, to play the role of the dutiful, childless daughter who exists solely to support the real family. I looked at Chloe. She wasn't even pretending to be grateful. She looked triumphant. It's for the kids, Jess, Chloe said, taking a breadstick. You can't be selfish when it comes to the kids. The pain in my head spiked, blinding white for a second. But as it faded, something else replaced it. A cold, crystalline clarity. They weren't asking me. They were telling me. They were stealing a life-changing sum of money from me, money Grandma had specifically promised me during our long Sunday afternoons together, and they were dressing it up as charity. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was a precise, surgical excision of my place in this family. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I couldn't. The air in the restaurant felt thin, as if the oxygen had been sucked out by their audacity. I looked at the bread basket. I looked at the flickering candle in the center of the table. I watched a drop of wax roll down the side and harden. Jessica, Martha pressed, her voice taking on that whining edge she used when she wanted to speed things along. Please don't make a scene. It's already done. The paperwork is with the family solicitor. We just wanted to tell you face to face so there were no surprises. So it's done? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. You've already instructed the lawyer to transfer my portion of the trust to Chloe. It wasn't a trust, Jessica, Thomas corrected me quickly, too quickly. It was a general estate dispersal. Grandma left everything to me to distribute as I saw fit. To my beloved son Thomas to care for the family. That's standard language. I am caring for the family, the part of the family that needs it. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the weakness in his jawline, the way his eyes darted to the left. He was lying. Not about the money going to Chloe, he fully intended to do that, but about the mechanism. My silence was making them uncomfortable. Chloe shifted in her seat. God, don't be so dramatic. You make plenty of money. Why do you even care? What were you going to spend it on? Expensive vacations? Another cat. It's not about the money, Chloe, I said softly. Then what is it about? Thomas snapped. Because it feels like you're about to be difficult. I warned your mother you'd be difficult. You've always been possessive. I took a deep breath, pushing down the urge to flip the table, to scream, to list every single time I had bylaid them out, every time I had been the designated driver, the free babysitter, the emotional support animal. I pushed it all down until I was nothing but ice. I just have one question, I said. Thomas rolled his eyes. Go on. I locked eyes with my father. I didn't blink. Did Grandma know? The reaction was instantaneous. Martha flinched as if I'd slapped her. Chloe frowned, looking confused. But Thomas went pale. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a blood pressure drop. He picked up his water glass, and his hand was shaking so badly the water sloshed over the rim onto the white tablecloth. That is irrelevant, Thomas stuttered. Grandma is gone, Jessica. I am the head of this family now. Did she know, I repeated, slower this time, that you plan to ignore her specific wishes regarding the distribution of her assets? Did you tell her, when she was lying in that hospital bed, that you were going to cut me out? I didn't cut you out, Thomas hissed, leaning forward, his voice a venomous whisper. I am managing the estate, and how dare you bring her up like that? She would have wanted Chloe to be secure. She loved the great-grandchildren. She did, I agreed. But she also knew who visited her. She knew who managed her medical appointments. And she knew who asked her for money every single month for the last 10 years and who never asked for a dime. You think you're better than us? Chloe spat, her face flushing red. Just because you have a career, you're cold, Jessica, that's why you're alone. Grandma knew that too. That's enough, Thomas said, slamming his hand down again. People at nearby tables turned to look. He didn't care. He was rattled. The decision is final. The transfer happens tomorrow morning. If you try to contest this, Jessica, if you try to drag this family into court and waste money on lawyers, I will make sure you are alienated from every single person in this clan. Do you understand me? I looked at my father, a man who had raised me, a man I had once admired. I saw a bully who was terrified because he knew he was walking on thin ice, even if he didn't know exactly why yet. I understand perfectly, Dad, I said. I picked up my purse. I'm not staying for dinner. Happy birthday to me. If you walk out that door, Martha called out her voice trembling with manipulative tears, don't expect us to call you. I don't expect anything from you anymore, I said. I walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air hitting my face. My headache was gone. In its place was a sharp, vibrating adrenaline. I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and pulled out my phone. Thomas thought he had won. He thought his intimidation tactics had worked because I hadn't screamed or thrown wine in his face. He thought the standard language in the will was his shield. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Grandma hadn't just trusted Thomas. In fact, toward the end, she hadn't trusted him at all. To understand why my father's face went pale, you have to understand my grandmother, Beatrice. She was a woman of steel and silk. She had built a small real estate empire in the 70s, back when men wouldn't even shake her hand in meetings. She was sharp, observant, and she suffered no fools. Growing up, I was the only one who seemed to understand her. Chloe was the baby, the cute one who performed for treats. I was the quiet one who sat in her study and organized her files because I liked the order of it. As we got older, the dynamic calcified. Chloe and my parents saw Grandma as a bank vault. I saw her as a person. For the last 5 years of her life, as her health declined, Thomas became obsessed with preserving the estate. He constantly talked about legacy and keeping the assets in the family. But I knew what that meant. Thomas had a history of failed business ventures, a restaurant that folded in 6 months, a tech startup that was essentially a pyramid scheme. He was bad with money. He liked the appearance of wealth, but he lacked the discipline to maintain it. And then there was Chloe. My sister wasn't evil, but she was a bottomless pit of need. She had married a man just like our father, charm over substance, and they lived perpetually beyond their means. The extension, she mentioned at dinner, it was a sunroom with heated floors they couldn't afford, which had been sitting half-finished for 2 years because they ran out of cash. Grandma saw all of this. 6 months before she died, I was sitting by her bedside. It was just the two of us. The chemo had made her frail, but her eyes were as bright as ever. "They're waiting for me to die, Jessica," she had whispered, her voice raspy. "Your father is already counting the acres." "Don't say that, Grandma," I had soothed her, adjusting her blanket. "It's the truth," she snapped softly. "He thinks he's going to get it all. He thinks because he's my son, he has the right. And he thinks he can bully you out of your share because you're too polite." She gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Don't be polite, Jessica. Promise me. When the time comes, don't be polite, be smart." I had promised her, not fully understanding what she meant at the time. Now, sitting in my car outside the bistro, I understood. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson wasn't the family solicitor my father used, a strip mall lawyer who charged flat rates and did whatever Thomas told him. Mr. Henderson was Grandma's personal attorney. He was an ancient, terrifying man in a 3-piece suit who cost $400 an hour and looked like he ate sharks for breakfast. Thomas hated him. Thomas thought Grandma had fired Henderson years ago to save money. She hadn't. I hit the call button. It was 8:30 p.m. I expected a voicemail. Instead, the line clicked open on the second ring. "Jessica," his voice was gravelly and calm. "I assume the dinner did not go well." "They're moving the money, Arthur," I said, staring at the entrance of the restaurant where my family was likely ordering expensive wine on credit, celebrating their victory. Thomas told me tonight. He claims he has executor discretion to reallocate my share to Chloe. He says the transfer happens tomorrow morning. There was a pause on the line. Then, a dry, dark chuckle that sounded like paper tearing. Executor discretion, Mr. Henderson repeated, savoring the words with mockery. Thomas always did have an overinflated sense of his own authority. He is operating under the assumption that the will is the primary governing document. Is it? I asked, my heart hammering. For his share, yes, Mr. Henderson said. But your grandmother and I set up a separate structure for you, Jessica, specifically to bypass him. He doesn't know it exists because we didn't file the deed with his solicitor. We kept it private until necessary. He says he's going to the bank tomorrow, I said. Let him go, Mr. Henderson said. I will have a courier at the courthouse at 8:00 a.m. By the time your father walks into the bank, his authority won't just be suspended, Jessica. He'll be walking into a federal crime scene. I felt a shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just a defense. This was an ambush. What do I need to do? I asked. Nothing, Mr. Henderson said. Go home, take some tea, turn off your phone. Tomorrow, the world changes for Thomas. I hung up the phone. I looked back at the restaurant one last time. Through the window, I could see them. Chloe was laughing, her head thrown back. Thomas was pouring wine, looking smug, the lord of the manor. They had absolutely no idea that the ground beneath them had already ceased to exist. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed, watching the digital clock on my nightstand tick through the hours: 2:00 a.m., 3:30 a.m., 4:45 a.m. The silence in my house, the empty house Chloe had mocked, felt different tonight. It didn't feel lonely. It felt like a fortress. By 7:00 a.m., I was dressed. I made coffee, but I couldn't drink it. I was vibrating with a mixture of terror and anticipation. It was the feeling of standing on a high diving board, knowing you've already leaned too far forward to stop the fall. At 8:05 a.m., my phone buzzed. It wasn't my father. It was Mr. Henderson. Good morning, Jessica. His voice was crisp, cutting through the morning fog in my brain. The courier has delivered the injunction to the bank's legal department, and a copy has been served to your father's solicitor. The assets are frozen. Did it work? I asked, gripping the counter. It worked perfectly, he said. The bank manager at the main branch has been alerted. When Thomas attempts to authorize the transfer, the system will flag the account as under litigation. He won't be able to move a penny, not to Chloe, and certainly not to himself. What do I do now? Now you come to my office, Mr. Henderson said. There is something you need to see. While preparing the injunction, I had my forensic accountant take a preliminary look at the estate's activity over the last 6 months. The period where Thomas held power of attorney while your grandmother was in hospice. We found irregularities. The drive to Mr. Henderson's office took 40 minutes, but I don't remember any of it. My mind was racing. Irregularities. That was a polite lawyer word for theft. Mr. Henderson's office was in an old brownstone downtown, the kind with heavy oak doors and the smell of dust and expensive leather. When I arrived, he was sitting behind a desk that looked like it weighed more than my car. He didn't smile. He gestured to a leather chair and slid a thick file folder across the mahogany surface. Open it, he instructed. I flipped open the cover. It was a spreadsheet, dense with numbers, dates, and transaction codes. What am I looking at? I asked. This, he pointed a manicured finger at a highlighted column, is the primary liquid asset account. The money your grandmother intended to be split between you, Chloe, and the maintenance fund for the property. When Beatrice entered hospice care, the balance was just under $2 million. He flipped the page. This is the balance as of yesterday. I looked at the number, my breath hitched in my throat. $450,000, I whispered. Where did the rest go? That is the question, Henderson said grimly. Thomas has been drawing down on the account at a rate of $50,000 a week for administrative expenses and consulting fees paid to a shell company registered in Delaware. He's been draining the estate dry before it even hit probate. I felt sick, physically sick. He wasn't taking my share to give to Chloe because she needed it, I realized, the horror dawning on me. He was taking my share because there isn't enough money left to pay us both. Precisely, Henderson nodded. He needed your portion to cover the hole he dug. If he paid you your rightful share, the account would overdraft, and his embezzlement would be exposed immediately. By guilt-tripping you into donating your share to Chloe, he could give Chloe the remaining scraps, look like a hero, and hide the fact that he stole over $1 million. I sat back, the room spinning slightly. It wasn't just favoritism. It wasn't just Dad being a bully. It was a crime, a massive, calculated betrayal. He had looked me in the eye at dinner, lectured me about morality and family duty, all while hiding the fact that he had looted his own mother's legacy while she was dying in a hospital bed. "We have him, Jessica," Henderson said softly. "This isn't just grounds for removal as executor. This is prison time." My phone started ringing while I was still in Henderson's office. The screen lit up with Dad. I looked at Henderson, he nodded. "Answer it, put it on speaker. Do not agree to anything, just listen." I took a deep breath, my thumb hovering over the green button. I pressed it. "Jessica," Thomas's voice exploded out of the speaker, so loud it distorted. He wasn't just angry, he was hysterical. I could hear background noise, traffic, car horns. He was driving. "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" "I don't know what you mean, Dad," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "Don't play dumb with me," he screamed. "I'm at the bank. They told me the accounts are frozen. They said there's a court order. The manager, that little pipsqueak, he threatened to call security if I didn't lower my voice. He said I'm under investigation for fiduciary breach." "You are," I said. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and terrifying. Then his voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl. "You ungrateful little brat. You went to a lawyer after everything we've done for you." "I went to Grandma's lawyer," I corrected him. "Mr. Henderson." "Henderson?" Thomas laughed, a manic, jagged sound. "That old corpse, he has no authority, I fired him." "Grandma hired him," I said, gaining strength from the file folder sitting in front of me. "She created a separate trust, Dad, the Beatrice V. Miller Legacy Trust. She moved my inheritance into it 2 years ago. You don't control it. You never did. And because you tried to access it this morning using a general power of attorney, you triggered a compliance audit." You set me up," he sputtered. "I asked you a question," I said. "I asked if Grandma knew. You lied, so I let the legal system answer for her." "Undo it," he demanded. "Call Henderson right now and tell him it was a mistake. Tell him to lift the freeze. If you don't, Jessica, I swear to God, I will come over there and—" "And what?" I cut him off. "Hit me, like you used to hit the wall when you lost money on those stocks, or are you going to scream at me until I give up?" "I'm coming to your house," he said. "We are going to settle this. You, me, and your mother, you are going to sign a waiver." "Don't come to my house," I said. "I'm not there." "Where are you?" "I'm looking at the ledger, Dad," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "I'm looking at the withdrawals, $50,000 a week, consulting fees. Who is TVM Holdings, Dad?" The line went dead. Mr. Henderson looked at me with a rare expression of approval. "Well handled, but he will not stop. A man like Thomas, when cornered, does not surrender. He attacks." "He said he's coming to my house," I said. "He will," Henderson agreed. "And he will bring the rest of the family. He needs allies to browbeat you. He needs to turn this into an emotional argument because he has lost the legal one." "I need to go home," I said, standing up. "I need to protect my space. I can't let them intimidate me." "Take the file," Henderson said, pushing it toward me. "Make copies. Do not let that original out of your sight. And Jessica, if you feel unsafe, call the police." He is your father, but right now, he is a desperate man facing indictment. I drove home with the file on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw that I was already too late. My parents' SUV was parked crookedly on the curb, blocking my mailbox, and right behind it was Chloe's minivan. They were standing on my front porch, Thomas, Martha, and Chloe. Thomas was pacing back and forth, his face a mottled red. Martha was crying, clutching a tissue. Chloe looked furious, her arms crossed over her chest. They looked like a lynch mob in suburban casual wear. I parked the car in the garage and closed the door before getting out. I wanted a barrier. I walked through the internal door into my kitchen, checking the locks. Bam, bam, bam. Thomas was pounding on the front door. "Open this door, Jessica," he roared. "I know you're in there." I walked to the front hallway. Through the frosted glass, I could see his distorted silhouette. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the wood. "Go away, Dad." "Jessica, please." It was Mom this time. Her voice was high and thin. "Please, honey, just let us in. We just want to talk. Your father is so upset, he's having chest pains. You're killing him." "He's not having chest pains, Mom," I said, leaning my forehead against the cool door. "He's having a panic attack because he got caught." "Caught doing what?" Chloe yelled. "Trying to help me. You're such a jealous witch, Jess. You can't stand that I have a family and you don't. You'd rather burn the money than see my kids have a good life." "It's not about the kids, Chloe," I shouted back, my control finally slipping. "It's about the fact that there is no money." Silence, absolute silence on the porch. "What did you say?" Chloe asked, her voice muffled but distinct. I unlocked the door and opened it just a crack, leaving the security chain on. I looked through the gap. Chloe was staring at me, confused. Thomas looked like he wanted to kick the door down. "Ask him," I said, pointing a shaking finger at Thomas. "Ask Dad where the $2 million went. Ask him why there's only 400 grand left in the account. Ask him about the consulting fees." "She's lying," Thomas screamed, lunging at the door. The chain rattled violently as the wood groaned under his weight. "She's a liar, SH. E's trying to tear this family apart." I slammed the door shut and locked the deadbolt again. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave," I yelled. "You wouldn't dare," Thomas growled. "Try me," I said. "I have the ledger, Dad. I have everything." They didn't leave immediately. They stayed on my porch for another 20 minutes. Thomas alternated between threats and begging. Martha sobbed loudly, wailing about how I was destroying the family legacy. Chloe just stood there, silent. Eventually, the neighbors started coming out onto their lawns. The humiliation of a public scene was the one thing that could penetrate Thomas's rage. He bundled them into the cars and they peeled away, but not before he kicked over my potted fern. I waited until they were gone, then I collapsed onto the floor of my hallway. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. But the peace didn't last. By evening, the digital assault began. My phone blew up with texts, not just from them, but from extended family. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, aunts who lived in Florida. "Aunt Sarah, I heard what you did to your father, freezing his accounts. How could you be so cruel? He's provided everything for you." "Cousin Mike, Jess, really? Suing your own dad? That's low." Thomas was spinning the narrative. He was telling everyone I was a greedy, vindictive daughter who was suing the estate because I was jealous of Chloe. He was omitting the part about the theft. He was relying on the fact that family business usually stays private and that I would be too embarrassed to tell the truth. He was wrong. I went into my home office and laid out the documents Mr. Henderson had given me. I needed to understand the full picture. I needed to know exactly where the money had gone, because that was the key to breaking his hold on Mom and Chloe. I spent the next 4 hours cross-referencing the consulting fees with public records. Mr. Henderson had done the heavy lifting, but I found the details. TVM Holdings, the shell company receiving the money, was registered to an address in a shabby industrial park. A quick Google search of the address revealed it was a virtual office. But the signatories? I found a scanned document in the file Henderson gave me. The signatory for TVM Holdings wasn't Thomas. It was a man named Marcus Vane. I searched the name. Marcus Vane was a local investment guru who had been investigated twice for Ponzi scheme-like structures involving cryptocurrency and high-yield real estate bonds. Thomas hadn't just spent the money, he had gambled it. He had thrown Grandma's legacy into a scam, hoping to double it and look like a genius. And when the returns didn't come, he started cannibalizing the principal to hide the losses. And then I found the smoking gun. Buried in the transaction logs was a transfer from 3 months ago, $40,000. The memo line said, "Chloe Contractor Deposit." I frowned. Chloe had said the extension was stalled for 2 years. If Dad gave her $40K 3 months ago, the work should be done. I pulled up the text thread with Chloe. I hesitated, then typed. "Me, Chloe, did Dad give you $40K in October for the contractor?" She replied instantly. She must have been staring at her phone. "Chloe, go to hell, Jessica." "Me, I'm serious. The ledger shows a $40K transfer to your account on Oct 12th. Did you get it?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Chloe, no. He told me the estate was tied up in probate and he couldn't release any funds until next year. That's why he said we needed your share. He said your share was liquid, but the rest was stuck in assets." I stared at the screen. The lie was so multi-layered it was dizzying. Thomas had transferred the money out of the estate, labeled it Chloe, but redirected it to himself or his debts. He had used Chloe's name to launder the theft. "Me, he stole it, Chloe. He marked it as sent to you, but he kept it. That's why he needs my share. He needs to fill the hole before the auditors see it. He's using you." "Chloe, liar." "Me, image attachment. Photo of the bank ledger highlighting the transaction." "Me, call the bank. Ask them if a transfer was initiated to you on Oct 12th. Or better yet, ask Dad why the check image associated with this transfer was endorsed by him, not you." There was no reply. I sat back. I had planted the seed. Chloe was entitled, yes. She was spoiled. But she was also desperate for money, and nothing makes a person turn faster than realizing the money they were promised had already been stolen by the person promising it. The next morning, the escalation reached its peak. I received a courier envelope at my door. It wasn't from Thomas. It was a cease and desist letter from Thomas's lawyer, the strip mall guy. It accused me of elder abuse, claiming I had coerced Grandma into signing the trust documents while she was mentally incompetent. They were threatening to invalidate the entire trust. It was a desperate, scorched-earth tactic. By claiming Grandma was incompetent, Thomas was willing to drag her memory through the mud, claiming she was senile and manipulated just to get his hands on the money. I called Henderson. "He's filed a motion to contest the trust validity," Henderson said, sounding more bored than worried. "He claims Beatrice lacked capacity." "He's lying," I said, furious. "She was sharp as a tack until the end." "We know that, and we have the video," Henderson said. "Video. Standard procedure for high-value estate changes involving elderly clients," Henderson said. "I filmed the signing. Beatrice looks into the camera, states the date, states her intent, and specifically says, 'I am doing this to protect my assets from my son Thomas, who has no head for business.' It is admissible in court. It is irrefutable." "When can we use it?" "Tomorrow," Henderson said. "Thomas has called for an emergency family meeting at your Aunt Sarah's house to mediate this before he proceeds with the lawsuit. He thinks he can shame you into settling in front of the extended family. He thinks the threat of the lawsuit is his ace in the hole." "He wants a public showdown," I asked. "He wants a public surrender," Henderson corrected. "But if you bring the evidence, if you bring the ledger and the video, you can give him a public execution." I felt a cold resolve settle over me. Thomas wanted to do this in front of everyone. He wanted to paint me as the villain in front of the aunts and cousins. Fine. I'll be there, I said. Aunt Sarah's house was the traditional neutral ground for our family, a sprawling suburban home filled with overstuffed furniture and photos of smiling grandchildren. But when I walked in that Saturday afternoon, it felt less like a home and more like a courtroom. The living room was packed. My parents were there, of course. Thomas sat in the center of the beige sectional like a king on a throne, flanked by a weeping Martha. Chloe sat on the edge of the fireplace hearth, looking pale and chewing a fingernail. But the room was also filled with the jury: Aunt Sarah, Uncle Mike, two of my older cousins, and even Great Aunt Miller. Thomas had rallied the troops. When I entered, the conversation died instantly. The silence was thick, heavy with judgment. "You came," Thomas said, his voice dripping with faux sadness. He didn't stand up. "I'm glad, Jessica. Maybe we can finally put this ugly business behind us." "Have a seat, Jess," Aunt Sarah said, gesturing to a hard wooden chair placed in the center of the room, facing the sofa. It looked suspiciously like an interrogation spot. "I'll stand," I said, clutching my bag. Inside was my laptop and the file. "Jessica," Thomas began, putting on his glasses and looking over them at the assembled family. "We are all here because we love you, but we are deeply concerned. Your behavior over the last few days, freezing the family accounts, threatening your own father with legal action. It suggests a mental break. We think the stress of your job and your isolation has gotten to you." "I'm not isolated, Dad," I said calmly. "You are attacking your family?" Uncle Mike chimed in from the corner. "Your dad is trying to manage Beatrice's estate for everyone's benefit, and you're acting like he's a criminal. You need to drop this lawsuit, Jess. It's embarrassing." "He is a criminal," I said, my voice cutting through the room. Gasps rippled through the room. Martha let out a fresh wail. "Oh, stop it, how can you say that?" Thomas stood up, his face darkening. "That is enough. I called this meeting to give you a chance to apologize and sign the waiver. If you don't, I am filing the petition to invalidate the trust on Monday. We will prove that you manipulated a senile old woman into cutting out her own son." "Grandma wasn't senile," I said, "and she didn't cut you out because I asked her to. She cut you out because she knew exactly who you are." "She didn't know what she was signing," Thomas shouted, losing his composure. "She was on medication. She couldn't even remember the day of the week." "Is that so?" I asked. I walked over to the large flat-screen TV mounted above the fireplace. Chloe shifted away from me, looking scared. I pulled the HDMI cable from the back of the cable box and plugged it into my laptop. "What are you doing?" Aunt Sarah asked. "Showing you the truth," I said. I hit the spacebar. The screen flickered to life. The audio was crisp. It was a video recording of Grandma Beatrice, sitting in her favorite armchair in the hospice room. She looked frail, yes, but her eyes were sharp, staring directly into the lens. Next to her, holding a newspaper with the date visible, was Mr. Henderson. "State your name and intent," Henderson's voice said from off-camera. "Beatrice Victoria Miller," Grandma's voice filled the room. It was strong, devoid of the confusion Thomas claimed she had. "I am of sound mind. I am creating the legacy trust for my granddaughter, Jessica." In the living room, Thomas went rigid. "Turn it off," he snapped. "This is private." "Let her play it," Uncle Mike said, his voice lower now. He was leaning forward. On the screen, Grandma continued. "I am doing this separately from the main will because I do not trust my son, Thomas, with liquid assets. Over the last 20 years, I have bylaid him out of 6 failed business ventures. He has no respect for money, only for the status it buys." Martha gasped. Thomas looked like he was having a stroke. She's reading a script. Jessica wrote that for her." But the video continued. Grandma leaned closer to the camera. "Thomas," she said, addressing the lens directly, "I know you will see this. I know you will try to fight it. You will tell everyone that Jessica is greedy. But we both know the truth. You feel entitled to what I built. You are not. This money is for Jessica because she is the only one who never asked me for a penny, and for Chloe, poor Chloe." In the living room, Chloe's head snapped up. On screen, Grandma sighed. "I wanted to leave money to Chloe, but I know if I leave it to her directly, Thomas will talk her out of it, or her husband will spend it on nonsense. So, I am leaving a strict instruction. If Thomas attempts to access the main estate before probate clears, he is to be removed as executor immediately." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in Aunt Sarah's living room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Thomas was shaking. He looked around the room, seeing the doubt in his siblings' eyes. She was confused. She didn't mean that. "She seemed pretty clear to me, Tom," Uncle Mike muttered. "There's one more thing," I said. I pulled the file folder from my bag and opened it. I took out the enlarged copy of the bank ledger and the check image. I walked over to Chloe. "Chloe," I said softly, "look at this." "I don't want to," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at it," I commanded gently. She looked. I pointed to the entry. October 12th, $40,000 withdrawn. Memo, Chloe contractor. "Dad told you he couldn't give you money because the estate was frozen," I said. "But he withdrew 40 grand in your name 3 months ago. He cashed it. See the signature on the back of the check? That's not your signature. That's Dad S." Chloe stared at the paper. Her hands started to tremble. She looked up at Thomas. You told me the court had it," Chloe said, her voice cracking. "I had to take out a payday loan to fix the boiler, Dad. I had to sell my engagement ring, and you had $40,000. "It's complicated," Thomas yelled, sweating profusely now. "I was investing it. I was going to turn it into $80,000 for you. It was a sure thing. TVM Holdings was going to pay out next month." "TVM Holdings is a Ponzi scheme, Dad," I said, delivering the final blow. I looked it up. The money is gone, all of it. The $2 million from the main account? Gone. The 40 grand for Chloe? Gone. You gambled Grandma's entire legacy away. The air went out of the room. Martha let out a sound that wasn't a cry. It was a keen of pure devastation. She slumped against the cushions, realizing that her lifestyle, her security, her home, it was all smoke. Uncle Mike stood up slowly. He looked at his brother with pure disgust. "You spent Mother's money, all of it." "I was trying to build something," Thomas screamed, cornered like a rat. "I did it for this family. You don't understand the pressure." "I understand that you're a thief," Chloe said. She stood up. She walked over to Thomas. For a second, I thought she was going to hug him. Instead, she slapped him. A hard, ringing slap that echoed through the house. "Don't you ever," she hissed, "mention my children again. You stole their future." Thomas looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with hate and panic. "Jessica, please, you have the trust, you have money, you can fix this. Just write a check. Cover the losses. We can fix this." I looked at the man who had tried to steal my inheritance, who had gaslit me, who had tried to turn my entire family against me. I looked at him, and I felt nothing but a profound, exhausting pity. "No, Dad," I said. "I can't fix this, but Mr. Henderson can. The police are on their way." The fallout was swift and brutal. Thomas was arrested that afternoon. Mr. Henderson hadn't been bluffing about the federal crime scene. Because Thomas had moved money across state lines to the shell company, and because he had forged Chloe's signature on bank documents, he was facing multiple counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. He tried to fight it, of course. He hired a cheap lawyer who tried to argue intent, but the paper trail was undeniable. 3 months later, he took a plea deal to avoid a 10-year sentence. He got 4 years in a minimum security facility, plus restitution. But there was no money for restitution. My parents' house, the house I grew up in, had to be sold to cover the debts he had racked up. Martha was left with almost nothing. It was a tragedy for her, in a way. She had spent 40 years enabling him, looking the other way, enjoying the illusion of wealth. Now, the illusion was gone. She moved into a small one-bedroom condo in a retirement community. She's quieter now. She calls me once a week, and for the first time in my life, she asks me how I am, and she actually listens to the answer. I think she finally respects me, not because I have money, but because I was the only one strong enough to stop him. And Chloe. The revelation broke her. She realized that while she was the golden child, she was also the primary victim. Thomas had used her neediness as a shield for his greed. We sat down for coffee 2 months after the arrest. She looked tired, but the frantic, entitled energy was gone. She was humbled. "I'm sorry, Jess," she said, staring into her latte, "for everything I said at the restaurant, for thinking you were the selfish one." "It's okay," I said. "He manipulated us both. He played us against each other so we wouldn't look at him." "I don't know what we're going to do," she admitted, wiping a tear. "The extension is still half finished. The twins need braces, I know. I know I have no right to ask, and I'm not asking. I'm scared." I reached into my bag and pulled out a document. It wasn't a check, it was a deed of trust. "I'm not giving you cash, Chloe," I said. "Because if I give you cash, your husband will spend it, or you'll use it to patch holes instead of fixing the foundation." She nodded, looking defeated. "But," I slid the document across the table, "I set up an education and housing trust for the kids. Grandma's money, my share, is in there. It pays for the completion of your house directly to the contractors I approve, and it pays for the kids' school and medical needs directly to the providers." Chloe looked up, her eyes widening. "Jess, you don't have to do that. Dad said you hated kids." "Dad said a lot of things," I smiled. "I don't hate kids, Chloe, I just didn't want my own. But I loved Grandma, and she wanted the great-grandkids to be safe. This is what she would have wanted." Chloe burst into tears. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It was the first time we had touched in years without it being a performance. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you." I drove home that evening feeling lighter than I had in years. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. I walked into my study and looked at the framed photo of Grandma Beatrice on my desk. She was smiling that cryptic, knowing smile. "We did it, Grandma," I whispered. "We were smart, and we weren't polite." I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in my favorite chair, and watched the sun go down. I had my life, I had my integrity, and for the first time, I had a family that was built on truth, not secrets. It was the best birthday present I could have ever asked for.